Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Northern California Regional Conversation. I'm Julie Baker. I'm the Executive Director of Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. And this is our 6th of 9 regional conversations across the state of California. I think there are about 14 in this region that we've identified. And looking at the list, it looks like we've got a good cross section. There's always more to make sure are at the table, and we hope to continue these if the need is there. And we just wanted to give you a little bit of time for getting people in the room, as it were, the virtual room. So welcome everyone, and we'll get started in just a minute or two.
I can see Jim and Cheryl and Rachel and Stephen and Lisa. It's great.
All right. Well, Jadalisa, if you want to go ahead and put us back into meeting mode, we'll start an overview of what we're doing here today. It's great when we can see each other. And so Jadalisa is our programs administrator here at Californians for the Arts. So thank you for all the work that she's been doing over these conversations. So again, my name is Julie Baker, and I'm here with Eliza Tudor from Nevada County Arts Council. And Eliza is one of the board members for Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. We had also had been planning this with Deborah Lucera, who's also on our board from Butte County, but Deborah is also a supervisor and unfortunately was called away to a meeting this morning, as well as our own lobbyists for California Arts Advocates are in a meetings, hearings today. So you get myself with the state report, and you'll have Peter Gordon, who's Director of Federal Affairs for Americans for the Arts, is here as well. So we'll give you sort of a federal report, a state report, and then Eliza's going to give you a local report, at least from Nevada County, and what they've been doing in terms of pivoting, transitioning, adapting as a state local partner during COVID, and how to address some of the issues there. And then, of course, we really hope that this is a conversation. The reason we're doing this is Californians for the Arts' primary mission is to build public awareness of the value and impact of arts and culture in California. That's our C3, our nonprofit organization. California Arts Advocates, which is our C4, where we have a lobbyist in Sacramento, our primary goal there is to influence resources and legislation to support arts and culture in California. California is a state of 40 million people. We are a very small arts organization ourselves. We have a budget of less than $250,000, and we have 2 employees. So in order for us to be effective and informed advocates on your behalf, we need to hear from you. And these regional conversations, that is the goal of them, is to really listen as well as to inform what we're doing, and then to hear from you, what are some of the unique things that might be happening within your own communities that federal or state policy or resources can help address. And so that, again, we can be better informed and effective arts advocates for you. We've done, as I said, this is our 6th of 9 regional conversations. It's interesting to address sort of, again, the variety of regions in California. Central Coast and Valley had one, and that was a large kind of interesting mix of rural and suburban and urban within one region. I think you have some similarities of that in the North State. What I also want to say is that I live here. I live in Nevada County, so I am part, and I'm thrilled to be here and to be, coming from Nevada City this morning, addressing what is happening for all of us, and how we can best not only survive this, but also to come out stronger and more equitable and healthier as organizations and as artists and as a sector. But what we want to start off with first is to give you kind of an idea of what's happening on the federal landscape. I am the state captain to Americans for the Arts for Californians for the Arts, along with Brad Erickson from Theater Bay Area. We are on pretty much weekly calls with Americans for the Arts and the Arts Action Fund. And if you're not getting their emails, please sign up for both Americans for the Arts and Arts Action Fund, or at least sign up for ours, because we will send out those alerts as well. So Peter is here from Americans for the Arts. Peter, if you could give us, you know, in 5 minutes or so, an overview of where we are right now. We know that we've had CARES Act. Many of us have tried to access CARES Act funding within our own cities and counties, hopefully down to the arts. We know that there was the HEROES Act that was introduced in May and HEALS more recently by the Senate. Give us an idea of what's happening in the federal landscape, and then what are you guys specifically advocating for that we can support here in terms of arts advocacy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Julie. And thank you guys all for having me. As Julie mentioned, she's one of the state captains and has been great. And our state captains are just amazing in terms of being helpful to do specific outreach to a lot of the members there to get some of that grassroots action that's incredibly valuable for us as we're trying to do our work in terms of advocating on Capitol Hill. In terms of the CARES Act funding, as you guys know, huge bill, $2.3 trillion bill. Just to put it in perspective, the federal funding for all of this current fiscal year was around $1.7 trillion. So again, this is a crazy economic crisis, pandemic that we're in. We haven't been in this sort of situation in a while, even worse than 2009. So that's why so much money is trying to be thrown at the problem. In terms of where we are, just to briefly, the House and the Senate are out for recess right now. Typically, August would be dead quiet in DC. They'd be done, especially now, campaign year. Everybody would pretty much be gone for the rest of the year, coming back a couple of times to pass some bills. But this is truly an unprecedented time. Talks have broken down between Democrats and Republicans in terms of what this new package is going to be. The HEROES Act was passed by the House a couple months ago, which was around $3.5 trillion. The HEALS bill that was introduced in the Senate is closer to $1 trillion, which is what Republicans in the Senate and the White House are pushing for. So there's a huge gap in terms of what's going to be in that package. A lot of the argument is around the state funding, which I know is incredibly vital to you guys, with Dems pushing for close to $1 trillion in state funding. Republicans arguing that a lot of the money from CARES hasn't been spent by the states yet and should be closer to $150 billion. So just a brief overview. In terms of what we're looking for really in this package and the things that we're advocating for, the Paycheck Protection Program, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, hopefully. Many of you guys got funding from there. That was a huge program. It was incredibly popular, especially because of the potential for forgivable loans. And so we're hoping that there's an extension of PPP. There's going to be people who are able to get money for the first time are able to get a second bite at the apple, as well as some expanded rules around forgiveness. Again, for the first batch of PPP, that forgiveness period is supposed to be starting right now, but that's been delayed. So we're waiting to hear some guidance on SBA. So that's the main thing, one of the main things. Another thing is the unemployment insurance extension. As you guys know, states have varying levels of unemployment money that they're giving to people. What the feds did was they put a $600 flat rate per person on top of that, just because they knew that this was a crazy economic time and they wanted people to be able to pay rent, put that money back into the economy, things like that. So that's been a huge point of contention, with Dems wanting to extend the $600 per week, and Republicans wanting it to be lower, 200, 300, 400, have all been floated. So that's another point of contention. We're hoping it's a $600 a week extension, especially for a lot of our members, a lot of you guys, gig economy workers, people with mixed incomes. It's really vital, lifesaver for about 25 million Americans. And then the third thing is another round of funding for the cultural agencies. NEA, NEH, they were able to get money out the door and really quickly. So that was huge. We were able to show to Congress that NEA was able to work with a lot of the arts agencies to get that money out the door. And so we're hoping for additional money for those agencies. The other thing that I will say right now, I was just on a call, a coalition call. So we've been working with a lot of coalitions, nonprofit coalitions, charitable giving coalition, cultural arts groups. And some of these are like the YMCA of the USA, United Way, American Heart Association. So groups that aren't necessarily in the arts field, but are nonprofits, and we all sort of have collective goals. And when you can go up to Congress with a coalition like that, it shows a greater show of force. And so they're more likely to listen to what we're advocating for. So on the call I was just on, we were hearing that there might not be a deal on this until after Labor Day, which again, this needs to be done as quickly as possible. That $600 a week extension that ended, I think, last week. And so this is vital for the economy and for a lot of people day to day trying to make it. So the other real big trigger for the government is funding for FY 2021. The current fiscal year, FY 2020, ends on September 30th. The House has passed 10 of 12 appropriations bills. The Senate hasn't passed any. Speaker Pelosi has said she wants to deal with COVID-19 relief funding and appropriations funding separately, but that might not be a realistic thing, just given the short amount of time and the stalemate that they're at right now. So that's another thing we're keeping an eye on. Again, talks have completely broken down, but the House and the Senate are not in session right now. There have been no updates in terms of meetings between, it has been typically Speaker Pelosi, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in the Senate, and from the White House, it's been Secretary Mnuchin of the Treasury and Mark Meadows, who's the Chief of Staff. So just want to throw that out there. A couple other things I wanted to mention. So there are a couple other bills that have been proposed, the Restart Act, the Save Our Stages Act, which are really vital piece of legislation in terms of filling in some of the gaps that PPP and some of these other funding streams have not been able to capture. That will be great for the industry. Nonprofits do have some issues with some of the things in the Restart Act, but again, it's something that we are supporting and hoping that can potentially be included in some final package. We know PPP will be in there, but we don't know if these bills are in there. So we've been really pushing PPP, the unemployment extension, and funding for federal agencies, but we're also pushing these other bills. So I will leave it there. Happy to answer any questions you guys have, and I'll put my email in the chat as well. If you guys later on have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or anybody else on the Federal Affairs team with any questions.
Thank you, Peter. It's great. You guys are getting the direct from DC report. And we were saying before that, they went out of session. It was kind of like by the minute things were changing. Obviously, things are slowing down a little bit right now. Peter, just quickly before I get into the state report, what do you think is the most effective thing people on this call could be doing right now in terms of federal advocacy?
That's a great question. I think just telling your stories to your representatives, hopefully they are back in the district. I don't know if they're likely not doing in-person meetings, but you might be able to call them up, get them on the phone. If you have any prior relationships with them, it's a great time to reach out to them, tell them how this has affected you, this has affected the industry. One of the things that we've been trying to point out to Congress is that arts groups have typically been the first groups that have had to shut down and will likely be some of the last to open back up again, especially because unlike sports, it's a lot harder to do stuff without people in the audience and trying to get that revenue. So just telling your story to your members of Congress whenever, if we send an action alert out, if Julie sends one out, please try and respond to that because it's a numbers game. If they see lots and lots of people are hammering them about this, they're more likely to step up and say, hey, I've been hearing from my constituents. Constituents are the number one thing for members of Congress. They're in the House, they're up every 2 years. They're up this year. A third of the Senate is up this year. So this is the perfect time to reach out to those members to let them know what is incredibly important to you guys.
Thanks, Peter. I think that's really critical for all of us to remember, and that the advocacy is really important, and particularly now. And so we hope that you will reach out to your Congress people at the, and a lot of them are back in district, and to share your stories of not only what, we were on a call in Orange County with Katie Porter, and she said one of the important things was if you received PPP, to let your congressman or congressperson know how much you need, how vital and important that was, right? So that, because now we are in negotiations for that second round, and that hopefully an ability for the most vulnerable industries, which of course is arts and culture, to get a second round. So please do share that if you did get PPP. If you were unable to access PPP, or if there were issues with getting it, or if you are not unable to get any aspect of CARES Act funding, that is also really important for them to understand where are the holes, where are the gaps, what isn't working. And that is why there are things like Restart and Save Our Stages, because when you're unable to actually operate, PPP isn't as valuable, right? Because you're not actually employing people at the moment, but you still may have overhead, a building to manage. So you want to make sure that you can, that you have other sources of loans, which is mostly kind of what Restart and SOS or Save Our Stages are about. I want to get into quickly, if I can, the state report and give you an idea of all the things that we've been working on. So as you know, I mean, in the beginning of the year, the picture of what was happening in arts advocacy was very different. California had a budget surplus. Our governor put in a $10 million one-time additional funds for the California Arts Council, primarily to expand cultural districts, of which Nevada County and Nevada City, Grass Valley, and Truckee are one, for example. I think there's others in this region that are also cultural districts, Redding, I think, as well. And so there was going to be an extension of that program, as well as $20 million in February was introduced by Assembly members Gonzalez and Christy Smith in one-time funds for small budget arts organizations in good faith to comply with Assembly Bill 5, which, Stephen, I got your email and I will address in terms of what's happening with that. And so we were looking at a 30 million potential increase at the beginning of the year. We were going to advocate for that 20 million in one-time funds that the Assembly was putting forward to be ongoing. So we were hoping that we would finally see the California Arts Council budget increase, which is the state arts agency, which is primarily what our organization has been advocating for and increasing for many, many years, because it was at about 1 million for 10 years. So we were hoping we were going to get to over $1 per person. We were going to be at $46 million. Well, obviously COVID hit. And what we then started to see was not only were we in a public health crisis, we're now entering a financial crisis. And so it was based on the advice of our lobbyist, which is when a lot of times in advocacy, as Peter will attest to, it's really reading the room, right? When is the right time to make your ask? When you're in a public health crisis, it's not the right time to run in and say, we need money for the arts at that moment. What we instead said, protect the California Arts Council budget. And so we moved quickly into, and many of you sent letters to your legislators and said, protect the California Arts Council budget. And in July, when Governor Newsom signed the budget, the $26 million approximately in ongoing funds for the California Arts Council was protected. This is good news. This is not necessarily going to last forever, however, if we continue to see a massive budget deficit, which right now they're predicting is $54 billion, as well as if we don't get funding from the federal government to the states, which is what the Democrats have been asking for. Those are going to potentially be very scary for state arts agencies, state agencies, and the arts are often, as we know, one of the first to get cut. We have always asked that if there are going to be cuts, that we are not disproportionately cut from any other agency. The other thing that I think our advocacy message has been, which I think I know our advocacy message has been, is that cutting a $26 million budget in a $200 billion overall budget for the state of California isn't going to solve their financial crisis, but it will be detrimental to the arts for decades to come. So we want to make sure that you're also amplifying that message. So that's number one. After we were able to protect that, we of course continue to work on legislation. Assembly Bill 5 was something that I worked on deeply before COVID. I did 18 workshops across the state of California, addressing not only our advocacy, but what it means for our sector. That is everyone shifted to COVID and public health, but that still exists. It's still there. You're going to still have to address that within how you hire people. It is the law that changed how you determine if someone is an employee or independent contractor, and it basically switched it to almost everyone is by default an employee. It made it very difficult for us in the arts to hire independent contractors. There is an Assembly Bill 2257. There were over 30 bills introduced this session regarding AB5. There's only one remaining. It is the author's bill, and it is going to appropriations now. It has an urgency clause. It needs a 2/3 majority. Assemblymember Gonzalez is convinced she has that, and I think our bet is that she has it as well. So we will expect to see that pass. When that gets signed by the governor in mid-September, early September, it goes into effect immediately, not waiting till January. And so I urge you to look at 2257, but the highlights of that, and I'm doing a workshop at the end of August with Silicon Valley Creates that we'll send out as well if you're interested in more deep analysis of that. But basically it allows for a number of exemptions for musicians in a number of different circumstances, including one-time single events. So in other words, Stephen, when you're booking a show for one night, you will not have to make them an employee. This is good news. And then it also allows for an exemption for master classes for 1 week, which actually is language we submitted. So somehow it did end up getting through, which is great. There's still not exemptions for most people in the performing arts other than musicians. We continue to advocate on behalf of the sector to address that, particularly for people who are working in service to small budget arts organizations. We've identified that budget around $1 million and under. And so we do have a template on our website where you can send a letter to your elected addressing this issue. There's nothing much more that's going to happen this year except for 2257. And then we will continue to address what we need for the sector beginning in the fall in terms of research. And there's a lot of research happening right now along the lines of AB5 and what is the impact on our sector. I want to mention a couple of other things. One's a good victory, which is that in, I think it was April, the governor introduced the Jobs and Economic Task Force. It was an 80-person task force that he put together. When we analyzed that task force, and it was how do we revitalize, how do we rebuild California, we saw that there was no one from arts and culture on that 80-person task force, which of course is atrocious in the fact that we are such a huge economic driver as well as social driver for California. So we fought collective advocacy. Many of us worked on getting someone at the table, and the good news is Deborah Cullinan, who is the executive director of Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, is now on the governor's Business and Jobs Economy Task Force. She is a force. I talk to Deborah weekly. She is working on jobs creation strategies for the creative sector, as well as we are. We've got about 6-point jobs creation strategy. It's like a WPA for the 21st century that we've introduced, that we've brought to legislators, a number of different legislators, as well as to the administration that we're working on, and we'll continue to do. And you can see that also happening in cities and on local levels as well. So we can get into more detail of that another time. There is a $100 billion, the Democrats introduced or actually I think it's a bipartisan framework for a $100 billion economic stimulus package here in the state of California. Senator Hertzberg brought that forward. We actually talked to Senator Hertzberg's office yesterday because it is identifying some of the stimulus for small businesses, but it doesn't identify small businesses as nonprofits. And so we, with Cal Nonprofits, have asked that nonprofits are included if this sort of framework was to move forward, that nonprofits would be included. And I just think it's an interesting note I wanted to bring to your attention is that Senator Hertzberg's office said, it's not that anyone is against nonprofits, it just wasn't in the forefront of our mind that that's part of small business. And I think that this is just such a huge advocacy lesson for us. I know Cal Nonprofits is a force in this, and if you don't follow them, please follow them because they work really hard to change that narrative. And so do we. And so I just want you to know that we are working towards that as well. And then finally, a lot of our messaging around how to how to shift where we are right now as a sector. You know, for so long we've used the creative economy and the numbers for the creative economy and the data to show that we are an economic impact. And although that's really, really critical and will continue to be critical, obviously right now while we're shut down, it's a little bit harder to make that argument. It is when we will get to the rebuild phase. We are currently in phase 4, most of us, in terms of being able to reopen. And so we are looking at how do we message around artists or second responders. Artists are here, we are able to make an impact currently while we're in a public health crisis. I think Peter will attest that what everyone is focused on right now is dealing with in government, is dealing with a public health crisis. What the arts have to think about, and the arts and culture sector have to think about, is how can we be of service, in service to public health, and how can we be part of the solution during a public health crisis? And I think you can look at that from your local to your counties to your state and even to the federal government. What can arts and culture do during this time period? And not just asking for money and relief, because particularly in the state, that's going to be harder right now. But also, how can they look to us and say, we are valuable workers, we are innovative, we are creative, we know how to stretch a dollar better than anyone, and we are already providing these kind of services in terms of online delivery, arts education, just mental health services. And there's a lot of other ways that we can integrate arts into other categories, whether it's mental health, whether it's recidivism, arts and corrections programs, some of the other state agencies that we can be looking to insert ourselves in and not just separate ourselves into what is the creative economy or what is separate in terms of even the state arts agency. So we encourage everyone to really think about how can you be of service to state and federal government right now during a public health crisis. And of course, our big thing also is to make sure that arts are seen not only as essential, but invested in, and that artists are seen as vital workers and a workforce that needs to be paid. One of the problems that we have for our sector long term and ongoing is that we are not necessarily compensated for our time and for our contributions. And that is something that really needs to change in terms of how we internally manage our businesses, as well as how we message so that we can see those investments being made. There's a lot that I think is hopeful right now in terms of an opportunity for us to really be seen at the center of all of these changes and effective changes that we can make. I also think that with a social justice lens and a racial equity lens, there's so much that the arts can be doing to uplift those messages and to, again, affect change in that way. So I think that there's a lot of hopefulness to what we can be doing right now, even when we all are really struggling, I understand, to keep our doors open and to make sure that we are here for the long term. So what I wanted to do now is hand it over to Eliza. And Eliza is actually right now in England, but with the miracle of technology is here with us today. And she is the executive director of the Nevada County Arts Council. She is an incredibly effective leader here in my community where I live, a state local partner to the California Arts Council. And I've been watching as the Nevada County Arts Council has done a tremendous job in pivoting right now during the crisis. And I'd love for Eliza to share with us what you guys have been doing here in Nevada County. And then when Eliza's wrapping up, we'd love to hear from all of you on some of the things that are either concerning or ways that you're pivoting and adapting and in being of service to your communities. So Eliza.
Thanks so much, Julie. And seriously, the most important part of this session this morning is to have heard from all of you. Ultimately, by the end of our Zoom call, it's absolutely critical that we have this dialogue, that it's not just us talking to you. But I'd love to thank Peter. It's so inspiring to hear the big picture, inspiring and troubling and engaging. It just makes it sort of inspires the very foundations of what we need to be doing. So thank you, and thanks, Julie, for that statewide overview. So I'm going to share some totally local things that we're doing in Nevada County, not because you're all not doing this already in yours, but just in case there are some ideas that crop up that you can steal and plagiarize from us, just go right ahead. So I've just, in the chat section, you've probably all got it open. You can copy and paste those things, but I'll just speak to a couple of things. So the first thing that we did when we went into lockdown for COVID-19, we immediately created a resources and information page on our website. We felt that was the least that we could do. And there was already, even in those early days, so much that we could draw from. And everyone was of such goodwill that, you know, we borrowed resources and information and all talked to each other like crazy. Then we ran an early impact COVID-19 survey because we knew that we wouldn't be able to advocate properly unless we knew what the local situation was. So it was great that that we had amazing surveys coming out from Americans for the Arts and California Arts Council, but we wanted to get real local. And so we ran our own, and that was extremely troubling. And we made it look very pretty, and we showed all the right people immediately so that we could ensure that whatever was going to be happening within local government, that the arts would have a foothold somehow, and that we would have at least preliminary data to support any asks that we were imagining we might want to create. And this was on the back of the economic impact study that we created last year with Americans for the Arts. That's the Arts and Economic Prosperity Study, and I'm sure all of you are sort of, you know, au fait with that, because we wanted the comparison. We wanted to be able to say, look, this is what our industry is worth on a good day. On an average day last year, we had really fresh data. And now look, you know, 4 weeks into a pandemic, this is what we're looking at. And so it was the comparison of those two data sets that was so fresh, that made a big difference to us locally. I immediately volunteered to join the grants team of the Nevada County Relief Fund. That's the county of Nevada. Not the arts specific, but the County of Nevada Relief Fund. They've done a splendid job, and Julie's intimately involved with the Nevada County Relief Fund, partly because I sort of wanted to spy for the arts. I felt it was really important for me to see, you know, for us to all know where those funds were going and what they were looking for, and you know, what the eligibility criteria should look like, could look like. So it's been really helpful, but it's also created an enormous amount of sort of intersector, cross-sector empathy. So rather than me in my bubble feeling like we deserve everything, I'm actually much more sympathetic and empathetic to the whole ecosystem and what everyone's struggling with. That's good. It's good to have that understanding. We created, so having sat on that committee, I was then able to feed back to my board of directors at Nevada County Arts Council, you know, what percent of the first tranche of funding for the Nevada County Relief Fund is going to arts organizations. And we could say that 15%, which is a nice number, but we thought we need to do more. And at the same time, I began talking with organizational leads, you know, executive directors and general managers within our arts ecosystem, to you know, talk about, well, what more can we do? And several of the arts organizations said, let's create a relief fund of our own, not for organizations, but let's create a coalition that supports fundraising for individual artists, which you know, follows up on what Julie was saying about artists being cultural workers. All of us are cultural workers. We're really important members of the workforce. So in order to do that, we've created a Gofundme campaign, and Michelle Amador is with us today. Michelle, all of us are muted except for me, but I can see you waving. Wave at everybody. Michelle is the Director of Development at the Mark Morris Dance Group in New York, but lives in Nevada County. And during normal times when we're not navigating a global pandemic, is flying backwards and forwards from New York. But her heart is here in California. So she and I have been working really solidly on creating this campaign. It's a little GoFundMe festival to seed fund this, because we don't have seed funds coming from anywhere else. It's very humble, you know, very bottom up, and we're going to do great things with it. We're just at the beginning. We only launched it a week ago. And so, but that idea of it being not just a Nevada County Arts Council thing, but it being a coalition of every single arts organization that wanted to join forces, and then we promote them like crazy. They don't have to give us money, but they put their names to it, they share it, they ask their patrons to donate, whether it's, you know, big or small. And so, you know, we're very positive and excited about that partnership. We also created an Arts in Storefronts initiative. So during the last big depression in, you know, 2008 to 2010, the San Francisco Arts Commission won a pot of money from the NEA to launch an initiative that would revitalize their downtown commercial corridors, you know, about 7 or 8 of them. And of course, in Western Nevada County, for which we're creating a similar initiative, we only have 2 downtown commercial corridors, Nevada City and Grass Valley. And the 2 of those downtown areas together are one of the 14 state designated California cultural districts. So we thought, we know we're not getting any money from the state this year. The $9 million that we had hoped for the California Cultural District program isn't going to come our way, but we're still going to need to write end of year reports. We're still going to know, you know, the state is still going to want to see shows of resilience. They're going to want to see the stories and the initiatives. We have to do this. So we raised as much money as we could. We're very grateful to a grant from our local economic resource council. The county contributed a couple of thousand. It's a tiny budget of 8,000, but we're basically going to transform our 2 downtown areas where there are businesses that have suffered devastating losses and are just lying empty.
Thank you, Alexa. That's terrific. I just want to jump in because we're getting to a point where I want to make sure that we get to the conversation. And it's so, I mean, there's so much that she has to share because she's just such an incredible leader. But I would love for you guys to, at this point, either ask questions of either the 3 of us of specifics that we mentioned, or bring up things that are that you want us to know that you're managing and dealing with. In the meantime, also, Jade Alyssa is going to put up a poll that we ask that you, if you scroll down, you'll see there's 2 questions there. It just gives us an idea not only who's here, but also what are some of the major things that you're facing in terms of a challenge. So if you could start to fill that out, that would be great. While you're doing that, if you want to speak, again, you can ask a question of Peter, myself, on federal and state advocacy. You can ask Eliza specifically how she's been so successful in pivoting right now in local advocacy, or bring up some issues that you see that are specific to your area. So I see Don Harris has his hand raised. So Don, I'm assuming you already filled out the form poll because you're so quick. That you, why don't you go ahead and speak at this point? You just have to unmute yourself. Hey, Don, you're still muted, so you need to unmute.
Okay, am I hearable now, audible?
You're good.
Good.
You're up next.
Hi, I'm Don Harris. I'm here in Nevada City and part of the rural team now. And I also sit on the State Arts Council. I've been there 7 years. I'm the longest sitting member. So I've seen a lot. I've seen the funding go from, as Julie said before, 1 million up to the 30s. And now we're struggling to sort of maintain ourselves. And a lot of things have happened in that time. We are simplifying in order to react to COVID. We are simplifying the way that we give out money. The grants are going to be a lot easier this year for people to write. There's going to be less categories, more generalized. We're also looking at operating funds as opposed to project-based stuff, which I think everybody advocated for, and that's very important. I do think what I'd like to ask for of the various folks listening, we need more data at the California Arts Council level. When we are doing relief packages, for example, we don't have enough data to be sure it's getting to the right places. A simple database of every arts organization within a county that was forwarded up the line to the California Arts Council would be immensely helpful. So that's one piece. The second piece is about 85, which I know has been going round and round in circles. You know, a law got passed, and it was supposed to, if I understand the intent, it was supposed to be for artists to be employees that have a stable income and health insurance, et cetera. And now, because there's so many unintended consequences, we're actually advocating for waivers. The very thing we're advocating for, we're now advocating for waivers from. And that strikes me as a little bit counterproductive, but I just think we have to keep our eyes on things like that.
Hey, thanks, Don. It's great. He lives here in Nevada County and is a member of the California Arts Council. Yes, so if you have studies that you've done for your communities, do send those off to the CAC staff. And also note that we will be sending a statewide survey in the next couple of weeks. So we can assess some of the impact and some of the things that we're also doing as a sector. So Alma Robinson from California Lawyers for the Arts has joined us. Alma, did you want to make a couple of comments?
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you for putting this roadshow together. I remember when we were in San Diego, pre-pandemic, talking about AB5 together, and you had to actually run around the state every day. So now you can just do it on Zoom. You go, girl. Anyway, couple of things. Our organization, California Lawyers for the Arts, is working with a national effort put together by SAG-AFTRA to try to amend the PUA, unemployment assistance for people who are gig workers, so that people who have mixed income get a better subsidy from workers' comp, and from unemployment insurance. And so that's something we're working on nationally. I think Peter might have touched on that. I'm not sure.
Is that the Schiff Chew bill? Adam Schiff
yes,
and Judy?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't know if he might want to make a comment about where that stands. Another thing is that the NEA had so much demand for their CARES funding, which they divvied out in $50,000 chunks, that only 831 organizations that applied got that. And so I would hope that if there's more CARES money, that the NEA might get the benefit of some of that for arts organizations around the country. Maybe they could make $25,000 grants and help more organizations rather than giving a limited amount with larger grants. I don't know if anybody's talking about that, but a lot of people did not get that CARES funding from the NEA. I think something like 3,000 applied and they funded 831. On the state level, as many of you know, we've been involved with Arts and Corrections for a number of years. Some of you have been collaborators in that project, including Nevada Arts Council and others that are on the call. State Arts Council was very involved in this work and continues to be, because they fund a number of organizations to work inside. Many of them are doing distance learning now. It's tough, but people are continuing to keep on with their projects. What we did was reach out to 21 arts organizations that have been involved a number of years providing arts programs in prisons. And we asked them to submit names that they would recommend, names of people who have successfully engaged for a number of years with the arts and shown rehabilitation characteristics, job training, a number of other personal characteristics that they would recommend. And we sent a list of 498 names to the governor's office of people that were recommended by these arts organizations for expedited release. This is in alignment with the governor's effort to release at least 8,000, and I've heard up to 17,000 people because of COVID. So the next layer in this is to try to find jobs for them. So I'm hoping that through our participation in the Jobs and Economic Recovery Program, there can be some effort to get money for jobs and job training for people who are coming out of incarceration, who have rehabilitated, who've been in job training programs, and they need work more than anything else. So this is an important level of activity to prevent recidivism. Julie, you mentioned recidivism earlier as an area, as an important area, and it's related to public health as well. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that we are having a payroll protection program workshop tonight on how to seek loan forgiveness. And that's on Zoom. If you look at our website, you can register for that, calawyersforthearts.org. It will be led by 2 accountants. Thank you.
Alma, thank you so much for joining us. It's always great to hear from you and the work that California Lawyers for the Arts are doing, and just such a valuable resource. So thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Jim Crossway, looks like you're next.
Great, thanks you guys. Thanks so much for putting this on. Really happy to be here with everybody. Relatively new in my position, only about 3 years. And my idol, of course, is Eliza right next door. And I spend all my time trying to keep up with Eliza and everything going on in Nevada County. So very much appreciate all their efforts. I did want to talk about a couple things.
You're doing great.
Checks
You're
in the
doing
mail.
so well in class.
I did want to piggyback on a couple things Eliza said. You know, a lot of times we will look at what Nevada County's doing and trying to emulate things, but this happened on our own. Our county is very supportive also, Eliza, of what we do. And when they got their CARES Act money, they actually contacted us and asked us to assist in redistributing that to all the our arts organizations and the small businesses of our county. So 20% of that money is going back to that, and we're really proud to be part of that whole thing and to be able to advocate for our users, which I think is a great thing. And the one thing that I haven't heard much about too that our board really thought was important is we redesigned our grants this year to make them a lot easier to distribute, and grants are a big part of what we do, re-granting process. And the schools and the teachers are something that we've really emphasized. The art teachers, when they go back, really are hurting for supplies and hurting for anything to put on the arts classes, and even virtual classes that we can help with and get our artists to help with. We're trying to help with all that kind of stuff too. So I think that's an important part of what we do. And then the other thing, and maybe people are all doing this, but we wanted to get into the fun part of people being at home. So we ran an at-home talent contest. We're now doing an at-home sculpture contest, which people can show, and all the resources for online classes that people can do, just things to do, you know, that we felt like that was a really important part of what we're doing too. And I'm sure that people are doing the same, but just want to share that that's where we've been kind of putting our time. And one of our board members, Barbara Bird, she's been a tremendous help with helping us to get some of our grants to redistribute. But Placer County is just really happy to be here, and hope we can be an important part of this whole thing with everybody else. So, by the way, Julie Baker is going to be speaking at our town hall on the 19th at 6 o'clock. So look for that on all our social media stuff. So.
Thanks, Jim. And, you know, it's interesting, and I wonder if you could speak to this, because I think this, you know, obviously my lane is to think about how to make help support everyone to be effective advocates in their community. The fact that they reached out to you when they had CARES Act funding indicates to me that there had been a long game of arts advocacy in Placer County, of illustrating the impact, and therefore when funds became available, your supervisors were and the staff were apt to say, let's make sure that the creative sector is included in this. Can you talk a little bit about, like, what do you think is some lessons in terms of how to make sure that we can all be effective advocates in our communities like Placer County?
I think we're lucky too, Julie, is one of the things. You know, our economic development director, Sherry Conway, started at the same time I did. And to be quite honest with you, we had a rebuilding process to go through. So it was important for us during this time to win back our county and to win back our supervisors. So we actually established that relationship first and foremost right when we started. So, and our credibility, I think, has been good. Speaking for our board, I think that they've gained a lot of trust in us. They've actually come to us on quite a few projects. They had a public arts, they needed a new vision with that. And so they came to us and asked us to help with that. And they've worked with our social media people. So I just think it's for us, them being our main benefactor, we had to do that. And I think we're really lucky that we've established that relationship and that trust. And I hope we've done that with all of our artists and our performing arts organizations, now that they know that we are there strictly for them, and that's our job one, and that's what we're here for. So that's my advice, is we don't want anybody to be talking about us doing anything different than supporting them. That's how I feel about it. So hopefully we're doing a good job.
It's so critical to never underestimate the value of those relationships with your elected officials, whether they are city, council members, boards of supervisors, the staff, the CEOs of your counties, and then of course, continuing to go up your elected officials, as it were, the pyramid, to your state representatives, and then on up to your federal representatives. Right now everybody is at home. And in a strange way, we actually have more access often to our lawmakers. And so I really do encourage you to work with your state local partners, to work with us, whatever it may be, to really get those folks on the phone, get them into a Zoom call and talk to them. It is important that they hear from their constituents. Other comments? I'd love to hear from more folks. Stephen, what's happening in Chico? I'm just going to put you on the spot since I know you.
I think, clearly a lot of artists and organizations are hurting, can't make rent, not in their venues. So it's very similar to what's going on. One thing we are doing, I think that's proactive at this point, is we were planning to start this. You and I had a conversation about it 8 months ago, pre-pandemic. About starting a cultural planning and mapping process for the city of Chico. So we weren't able to have the big kickoff for that, but what we have done over the summer is conduct about 6 or 7 Zoom roundtables with artists, arts organizations, advocates in the community to sort of identify the themes and some of the big ideas and some of those little gem ideas that surfaced. And so we've completed that stage of the cultural planning process. And next is moving into September and October surveys of cultural organizations, of creative industry businesses, and all those kinds of things. And the university is sort of spearheading that with partnership with the city. So that's a positive thing that we're doing.
That's terrific. I mean, I think we've seen here in Nevada County the work that the Arts Council did to get the research done. Working with Americans for the Arts and Randy Cohen really has helped to put us at the forefront in terms of the economic driver that we are. Libby, can I put you on the spot and get a report from in Humboldt County? What's happening up that way?
Yes. Thanks for doing this. Really appreciate seeing the whole region here. Immediately we saw that artists were devastated, and our board president started a Facebook fundraiser, and we sent out, we raised probably close to $7,000 and sent out $50 gift cards to artists who told us that they were drastically impacted. And then a local trust, the Ingrid Nicholson Trust, gave us $3,000 to send $50 gift cards to women artists, because that's their mission. So we did that, and we brought it to an end, but we still wanted to do more. We had conversations. Humboldt Area Foundation had reached out to us to see what the state of the arts was. And so, we told them the devastating news, and so they have given us some seed money to do a WPA-like program. Yeah, it's really awesome, and it also involves the Wild Rivers Community Foundation, and so we are working with Trinity County and Del Norte County as well. So we've got a triple county WPA thing that's getting ready to get started here. We were fortunate, we got a PPP, and then our board also opted to go for an SBA loan, which we also got. So we're looking at being able to serve the community. We work with the Humboldt Arts Council, which is the state local partner, and other arts organizations, Redwood Art Association, Arcata Playhouse, and communicate frequently. We have a call tomorrow to where most of the leaders of community arts organizations get together and commiserate. But I think the really big thing is that we've been included in the county economic resilience team, which is led by the Economic Development Department for the county. And there are weekly calls where everybody shares what what the state of their area is. So it's very cross-sector. We've always been involved extensively in economic development. So it's, kind of, I like to sit at the table so that I can say, every artist is a small business. Don't forget that. And so the county has really, unfortunately, they just started a grant program to help small businesses, but didn't include nonprofits. So that's where that is. But I'm encouraging artists to apply so that, they really prove the point that they are small businesses. We have, a really vibrant music sector, which has been totally devastated. Some of them are doing Zoom calls and stuff, but it's just not good. We have the Dreammaker program has over 100 community initiated projects, and most of them are on hold now, but there's some that are still moving forward. Trajectory works with artists with developmental and other disabilities. And it's so important for them to reach out to those people, especially since this time of social isolation. And, it's just so important what they're doing. We also have a woman who's doing English as a second language, and she's moved to Zoom, and she has people from all over the world Zooming in. So, there are a few of those things happening. People are starting to get more creative now, which is, great to see. So,
thank you. Libby, I want to touch base with you about your WPA 21st Century projects, because we're definitely seeing this across the state, and we're trying to do it at the state level. And then I'm working with Americans for the Arts on trying to see how we can incorporate in the federal level. So I'll be in touch for sure.
Right.
I think it's really important. One of the things that she's highlighting here in terms of being effective advocates within your community is not only the relationships with your elected officials, being at the table with economic development from the get-go, and then also those public-private partnerships. And we know how critical those are going to be going forward. The public sector, the government, isn't going to be able to solve all our problems. They're not going to be able to continue to just write the checks, particularly at the state level. And so anytime that you can either look to a community foundation, as somebody mentioned in the chat, or local businesses, and ways that you can do those cross-sector partnerships, particularly now in partnership with public monies, I think is a really strong strategy at the moment. I'd love to invite more people to bring up some issues. If not, we can kind of look at the survey results, but does anyone else have other things that they want to add? Again, one of the things here was, did you want to raise your hand, Sarah? Okay, Sarah, and then David Reed Smith from Truckee. Unmute. Wait, you had it for a second. Try again. There you are.
Am I here? Okay. Hi, Sarah Smith. I'm an area artist in the North Tahoe Truckee area, and the co-chair of the Truckee Arts Alliance. Have been involved with the Truckee Cultural District as well. So I'm very intimately familiar with the power of multi-sector partnerships. So I've had several conversations recently with, and forgive me, I'm outside, so I have, and there goes the barking dog across the street. So apologies. It's our life these days, isn't it? Like, sorry for the barking dog. So a conversation just yesterday with an area gallery.
Sarah, I'm going to let David speak for a second, and while you get yourself set up.
Yeah.
So David,
yeah, sorry about that. Good God.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Julie. I'm David Reed with the Yuba Sutter Arts and Culture Organization based in Marysville. We're the only two-county SLP in the state and have been for almost 40 years now. Great to see so many familiar faces and friends, and our former executive director, Eliza, live from England. So it's a great program. Thanks for putting it together. You know, we're fortunate in some respects. We're financially stable. We too got PPP money, SBA loan money, NEA CARES grant money. And of course, we've, you know, we're not doing anything active in the classrooms and trying to reinvent many of our school-based programs, whether it's Scholastic Art and Writing Awards or Poetry Out Loud or any of those programs where we're jump starts, where we're used to going into the classrooms with teaching artists and trying to come up with some virtual solutions. We have many virtual programs, whether it's our songwriter workshop or our open mic poetry events or our weekly artist interviews or bi-weekly weekend programs. And we've gotten pretty good at that. Got great production values using StreamYard, and then of course fed through our Facebook page. So in terms of engagement, I feel like we've learned a lot in spite of the suffering and not being able to reopen our theater that we're fortunate enough to own, or our art galleries around town. One of our biggest challenges and kind of my current mission, if you will, is to really up the conversation with our elected officials and economic development folks and business people. And we're well connected to all of them. They all know us and they go, okay, yeah, here comes Reed again talking about art and culture. And we're very aggressive in terms of marketing across, you know, traditional media, all social media platforms, that we are unavoidable. But to become part of that bigger conversation about the importance of art and culture to overall economic development, whether it's cultural tourism or just basic quality of life issues for residents, forget the commercial aspects of it. And we have a nice, solid little arts and culture community. It's unfortunately somewhat siloed. I've tried to counsel some of the arts organizations about the funding that is available. And boy, I'll tell you, there even local Yuba County and Sutter County funding that the counties have presented, which is available in our case to nonprofits. It's been frustrating because they're somewhat lackadaisical. They'd rather sit around, and even though we try to provide that leadership, it's like, come on, I'll help you write the grant or the application. And it's just bizarre to me, but it's something we can work on. So, but becoming, you know, more top of mind with community leaders, electeds, staff, as well as economic development and business folks is really one of our big goals for the next couple of years. We know them, they're on our board. We have 3 out of 4 cities represented on our board. And of course, our 2 counties have supervisor representatives. So we're doing well. We're solid financially, fortunately, and you know, the only way is up. So thank you.
David, that's an uplifting report. Thank you for that. And I think it's important, again, to recognize the long game of what is advocacy. And a lot of us really talk about wanting to be at the table, right? And I think one of the struggles that arts and culture and nonprofits and arts and cultural workers have had is not to be at the table. That economic impact, you know, studies that you can do is part of how you get to the table. But one of the things I read recently is we don't want to just be at the table, we want to rebuild the table. And I think that's something we also want to think about. Sarah, you're back indoors, maybe without a dog. And we did say these were 60 minutes. Every one of them have gone 75 to 90. So
I'm sorry, and if I may, just one follow-up question, Julie, on something you said, and I haven't done the research yet. I've kind of created my own little spreadsheet, but is there a template out there among any of the arts organizations, local, national, to create your own, hey, here's the economic impact of the art and culture sector in our community? Is there a fill in the blanks kind of thing? If there is, somebody please let me know.
Sure. I'm sure there's a number of us on the call that can put some stuff in the chat, as well as our Americans for the Arts for sure has a lot of that data points. Sarah.
Oh, okay, unmute. All right. So very quickly, I'll keep this brief because I know we're on time. Just one other layer of potential advocacy for our creatives and creative businesses in the area. I know that those with brick and mortar businesses are suffering tremendously. And especially like up here in Tahoe and the Truckee area, we have an enormous influx of visitors. So it's busier than it is on a normal summer. You know, it's almost as if there's no pandemic. Or it's actually because of the pandemic and people aren't flying, so they're driving here. So the perception for, say, you know, property owners who are renting to businesses is that, oh, you must be doing great. Look at all these people. But then retail sales are actually down anywhere between 30 and 50% year on year. So, so what, for instance, one request was made was, is there any way that some of us as organizations might be able to help write letters that have a bit more official teeth, and just something that brings in some of our multi-sector partners to say, hey, let's see if we can keep some of these wonderful businesses that help to keep the culture of our area alive. So can we please try to recast, you know, recast the rent for a 6-month period or for a 1-year period to allow recovery and rebuilding by these businesses so that they can stay afloat and stay with us. Or, you know, for those who own their storefronts, can we find a way to help talk with mortgage, you know, companies and see if we can advocate to the same, engage the towns, the counties, the business associations, all of it. And so anyway, that was one request.
Yeah, that's interesting. And not only in terms of the cross, you know, I think one of the things that you see in advocacy is that the arts have such a multiplier effect for our downtowns that going to advocacy with your partners, whether it's, you know, the hospitality industries, the restaurants, everyone else who's benefiting from a healthy arts ecosystem in your communities is definitely a good advocacy point. There was a Senate bill at the state level that Scott Wiener brought forward, which was to actually try to have, you could try to get out of your commercial leases right now, because we have a lot of nonprofits that are in commercial leases, particularly in the performing arts sector, who cannot use their venues. Unfortunately, that didn't get through because, as you can imagine, the commercial property industry didn't want that to happen, and they can be very, very powerful. But, you know, those are things that I just was actually texting with our lobbyists saying, are there any things coming up that are about rent moratoriums that the state is actually looking at? Because those are some of the issues. It wasn't necessarily a high button issue on our call here today. Rent was about 12%. Obviously, the most, I think, with the folks who are on the call today, 83% is canceled programs on lack of funding and lost revenue, which of course is the first thing. And then providing services to constituents is your next challenge, because we're so used to doing it in a certain method. We have about 7 minutes left. I see Alma has her hand raised, and I just wanted to invite anyone else if there's anything anyone else wants to bring to the table while we're here. Alma.
Thanks, Julie. Since you brought up the rent moratorium issue, rather the eviction moratorium issue, I wanted to mention that one of the new projects we're undertaking now in Sacramento is the CARES Act grant from the city of Sacramento to provide mediation to landlords and tenants of both residential and commercial properties if they are in a dispute about the rent, about unlawful detainers, about when is the tenant going to move out, or can they pay a reduced rent. We'd like to help people mediate and come to a collaborative agreement about those issues. And because it's such a strong, forceful program in our Sacramento office, we have other people around the state also available to work on that issue. So if you have any knowledge of people who would like to use this service, it's great to use it before the bell strikes. And we don't know when those moratoriums are finally going to be lifted, because there's talk even from the president about extending it. Who knows how he can do that? But it's created a lot of uncertainty for people, which is very stressful, and we would like to help open those lines of communications. So you can get in touch with us through our main number or submitting an inquiry online. Thanks.
Great. Your mediation services are so valuable. Thank you, Alma. Cheryl King, did you want to contribute to the conversation?
Well, yes, hello. It's my first time here. But what you should know is I live in Chico, California. I am good friends with Deborah Lucero. I moved here in 1987 to be head of the Butte County Arts Commission when the California Arts Council had state-local partnership programs. I was a theater professor and an arts advocate in Colorado before I moved here. So I'm friends with Deborah. She and I have been talking a lot about what's happening. And I'm very, very, very committed through my business, which is an educational consulting business, to assist in funding arts programming and promoting the arts. And so I'm looking at ways to become more of an arts advocate, and that's why I wanted to be enjoying this conversation. And I will be having that conversation with Deborah also. But I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm here. I think what you're doing is incredibly valuable, of course, because I'm a strong believer in the arts, and the value of the arts integrated into our educational system cannot be overlooked, and it's usually overlooked. It's the first thing to go when the budget cut, as we all know. My motto was always eliminate the arts, and then I waited for people to go, oh, and I would go as a frill, because they're not a frill, they're real, and our children need them on all levels. So anyway, that's who I am. Thank you for listening to me, and I will be continuing to join your conversations.
Well, welcome, Cheryl. I'm so glad you introduced yourself, and welcome to, this is our first one of doing this within a region, and Central Coast and Central Valley felt that it was something they'd like to see happen more often. We can't do 9 regional conversations every quarter. That would basically be a full job for Jaylis and myself. But if this is of value and you want to continue regional conversations, because some of you meet within your own communities, we are happy to do that, particularly for the larger areas that have more rural. So if that's something you'll see in the survey afterwards, we encourage you, please fill out the survey. And again, I'll just put a pitch out there. If you're not a member of Californians for the Arts, we encourage that you can become an individual member, or you can also be a member of California Arts Advocates, which helps to pay directly for our lobbyists, and that helps on your organization can be a member. So many of you are on this call, and I thank you for that support. It really does make a difference for us. I wanted to invite Alyssa Weir from Mendocino to join the conversation.
Hi, thank you to you guys for putting this together. And I had no idea that there were so many cool people living in Nevada City. So that's an interesting feature of today. We're really going through all the similar things that everyone else is going through with the COVID resources and response page. We're convening monthly Zoom meetings with our community so that people can, so that the sort of the fabric of our community doesn't start to come apart, and also so we can start hearing good ideas that arise from grassroots sources that we can kind of amplify, because that has been a really good function of our organization, is to support things that are coming out of the community and give them power and voice. The main reason I wanted to come on and sort of plant a seed here today is that we too are involved in our economic development efforts in Mendocino County, and there's one now that's convened. It's called 2030, so it's looking at a long-term push for Mendocino County, where we want to be in 10 years. And so I was invited to participate in that, and then we were able to choose kind of a piece of it that we wanted to work on, and the most significant one for us would be economic diversity, or at least the most appropriate. But I do feel that that I'm starting to feel really frustrated with some of the language of economic development, and how I think we need to expand our vocabulary around economic development. And the main reason this is kind of rising to my consciousness is that it's a strategic planning year for us. So we have been talking broadly in the community, and one thing I hear from Native American artists is that they feel that they're asked to do a lot of labor for the community, and it's not reciprocated in a way. They're taking on a lot of emotional labor, and just processing labor. And I feel that the arts are analogous in that way, that we do a lot for our communities around economic development and quality of life, and it's not reciprocated. It's not met or seen, and we don't. And part of that is not having the language for it. And so one thing that is coming out of this conversation with Native Americans is that I'm beginning to see that we need to embed a spirit of and practice of reciprocity in all of our work. And reciprocity is not necessarily the language of economic development. That is about jobs and goods and services. So I really feel like this pandemic has offered us a really kind of once in a century opportunity to blow apart some of these rigid, thought patterns that we have around the economy. And so I just would love to partner with bigger organizations, better thinkers, and just really broadcast this language, a new language. We need to kind of become partners in creating that new language, and then sharing it with each other. So that's where I'm at.
Love that. Love that. So I would love to talk to you more about that. We think a lot about that and in terms of a overall picture of wellness also, which I think, if you look at countries like New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, who's I'm a big fan of, and a number of other countries that are being led by women, they're actually trying to change the way that we talk about a successful country based on a wellness index versus a concept of gross domestic product and, economic and jobs, right? It's, are your residents well? And that might mean public health, mental health. Do they have, and she actually says access to arts is one of the indicators of a society that is well. And so I think I love this concept of, and I agree with you, I think we're at a moment, that's my hopeful part, is that I think we are at a moment where we can, like I said, rebuild the table. Number one, we have to be at the table. There's no doubt about it. And it sounds like so many of you have done such an excellent job within your communities. And this is so critical in rural communities that the arts are at the table, because we know how much we do. But I agree with you. It's still this, like, it's very unequal in terms of we do so much, we're not compensated at the level that we should be. And then we're not thought of. We're often not seen in that same way. It's like, oh, it's nice to have when things are good, but things are hard right now, so we'll focus on other things. So that is where that arts integration strategy comes into, which is like to think about yourselves not just within the perspective of performing arts, but in all the other aspects of what we do for our communities in terms of connections. And so Don, it looks like Don has his hand up. He wants to add something, but listen, I would love to be in touch with you more about that.
Here, hi, I'm unmuted now. Julie, I wanted to piggyback on what you said a little bit about the wellness index. I've been very fascinated with that for a while. It comes out of Bhutan. It's called the Bhutanese Index of Wellness, and they have 23 different factors. Unfortunately, Bhutan itself is only in the mid-range. I think they finished 70th out of 150 countries. But the United States, I think we're in the top 20 by these measures. But I think that the female presence in leadership around COVID, for example, has shown a lot. It really shown a lot. And to have someone advocate for this, the use of the Bhutanese Wellness Index is great. Throw out the gross national product and let's talk about wellness.
I love it. I have to tell you guys, this is, like I said, the 6th of 9 that we've done of these regional conversations. Every one of them is completely different. It is so fascinating. Jadalis has been on every one of them as well, and so she can attest that they're completely different. And so it's wonderful to see where they morph and where we go with them, and the new ideas that are coming out of them. So thank you so much for everyone for showing up today, for raising your voice, for being advocates for the arts. Please recognize how critical that is, particularly now. If we're not making our voices heard, I can assure you they're not going to be thinking of us. So we have to do that. We have to write to your local city, county, state, and federal representatives consistently showing up and talking about the impact that we're making, as well as how we can benefit communities right now, even when the perception is we're shut down. You're still working. You're still doing everything you can to provide cultural and community connections through the arts. So I'm going to invite Eliza to wrap it up for us here and thank everyone for your contributions. And if you are interested in doing this again, put that in the survey and we can try and find another date maybe towards the fall, which is right around the corner somehow. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Julie. Great job. Ellison, I just can't resist letting you know, check out the Wellcome Trust's report. It's like a definitive report on arts and health and wellness. It's just amazing. So probably the last meeting I attended before I moved back to the US in 2008 was at an all-parliamentary committee of arts and wellness at the House of Parliament, in which the leader of Bhutan spoke about gross domestic happiness. It's a thing. And many countries, including Europe, really respect it. I just had a doctor's appointment this afternoon with my mum, and there lying on the counter were flyers all about social prescribing. I'm not going to tell you what that is. I challenge you to look it up. It's absolutely amazing. Across Europe, this is a phenomenon. We're just terribly behind in the US, so let's all get with it.
Oh, let me just
Guys,
say,
thank you so much.
that is being talked about. Prescribing arts. So instead of like just get a gym membership, right? That's what our healthcare providers prescribe. Imagine if they prescribed arts, right? Access to online classes, whatever. So that is being talked about here in California.
It is, and literally in the last couple of years. So the more we know about it, the more we can talk about it and share and advocate for it. Guys, thank you. You've all been amazing. And Julie, thank you so much for being such a superb chair of our meeting and hostess mostest, and Peter and all of you for attending today. We've learned such a lot. Are you going to be doing anything with the transcription, like pulling key notes, links and things like that, Julie?
Absolutely, yeah. So the follow-up to this is that we are combining all 9 conversations to see what maybe there are some common threads. It really is to help inform our policy development in terms of what we're proactively working on at the state level. And then also it is to address some of the specific regional issues and where we can provide support. You know, there are places where there are holes in terms of how to be effective advocates, and we want to be able to add that layer of support. So it sounds like a lot of you got that already down, and that is so encouraging to hear. Oh, there go my dog. So anyway, yes, there'll be more reports back to everyone based on what are the summaries of the regional conversations. We will finish them Friday. Thank you.
Perfect. Now you're all going to become members of Californians for the Arts. And we'll be talking to you very soon. There are so many different workshops and amazing live Zoom conversations that Julia and the team are organizing right now. So just keep checking in with the website. Jade, thank you too. Take care.
Everybody, have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and well.
Yeah. Bye.